Let's go to our homework, and I will go over one of the homework questions. And is there a particular question on the homework you are stuck on?
Number one. I can't even
Okay.
get past that point.
No problem. So let's go to the homework and let's look at number 1. So we have Jane's band wants to spend no more than $575 recording their first CD. The studio charges at least $35 an hour to record. Graph a system of inequalities to represent this situation. So the first thing I like to do is to define my variables. So we know that we're going to use X and we're going to use Y. And we know that one of the fees or one of the items is going to be charges per hour. So we're going to be able to say that X is the cost per hour. So it says the studio costs $35 an hour, or sorry, not the cost per hour, the number of hours. Because if she goes for 1 hour, it would be $35. If she goes for 2 hours, it would be $70. So we'll say that X is the number of hours she goes into the studio. And then the second one says she wants to spend no more than $575. So basically, what that's saying is Y is going to be the total cost. So we have Y has to be less than or equal to $575. And then the total with hours is Y is greater than $35 per hour. And there's no y-intercept. It starts at 0 because if you go for 0 hours, it would cost $0. So when you're graphing this, you would need to go by probably hundreds on the y's because we know that she has a max of $575. So I would say this is like 100. 200, and we'll keep going. There's my 600. So we have a max or a cap at 575. So that would be like this line here. And it's going to be horizontal. And then we would shade below. Ooh, Zoom is very dark. Okay, we talk later. All right, so that would all be shaded below. And then the other thing is, we don't talk about it so much, but we know that her cost can't be negative. Like, she's not going to have negative money. So y is also greater than 0. So really, and it doesn't matter so much, but we know she can't spend less than $0. So technically you have another line here. So her cost is going to be between 0 and 575. And then the number of hours is going to be similar. You can't have negative hours. So the x value has to be greater than or equal to 0. And then it's also going to follow my slope. So that's y is greater than 35x. So I would take that 575 and kind of divide it by 35 and get 16.5. So what that tells me is I need my x's to go out probably to about 20. So if I take these, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. So if I take them by 3s, that would get me to 18. So I'm going to make my x's go by 3s. So this is 3 hours, 6 hours, 9 hours, etc. So 3 times 35 is 105. So I can kind of get my points or my graph by applying that slope. So I go up to 3, it's at 105. At 6, it's at 210. At 9, again, I'm just plugging in the points into the equation the same way you would do any other graph like we did back in the day. And once you have those first couple points, then you can just connect them. We know it went through the origin. There we go. So it should look something like that. So then the idea is that she can't cost less than that because y's are greater than. So my shading is going to be above my line, or this region in here. So it just says graph a system of inequalities to represent this situation. So our situation is that she could spend any number of hours in this triangle in the studio and be under her total allotted cost. So all of the solutions would have to come from that region. So for example, she could spend 6 hours in the studio. She could spend 7 hours, 9 hours, 17 hours she can't spend because 17 hours is over here.
Like, you just have to, like, kind of make equations as you go sometimes, like, to fit
Exactly.
what it's asking for.
Yeah. So, like, as I was working through the problem, I was like, oh, well, my domain, we can't spend negative dollars, or I can't spend negative hours. So I added those equations kind of as I was going.
Okay. I had the first equation, and I just stopped. I had no idea what to make for the other one.
Okay. Yeah, it's sort of... It says medical professionals recommend that patients have a cholesterol level below 200 milligrams per deciliter of blood and a triglycerol level below 150 milligrams per deciliter. Write and graph a system of inequalities that represents the range of cholesterol and triglycerol levels for patients, where C represents the cholesterol levels and T represents the triglycerol levels. So what we'll do is kind of just walk through that problem. So the textbook actually did what I like to do to start, which is to say that C is cholesterol and T is triglyceride. And then what we need to do is talk about the levels. So it says your recommendation for cholesterol needs to be below 200. So again, this is a case where it can't be less than 0. A lot of word problems can't be in the negatives. Like time can't be in the negatives. You can't have cholesterol levels in the negatives. You can't have money in, well, sometimes money can be in the negatives, but most word problems in math, money can't be in the negatives. So a lot of these are going to be limited to those zeros. Just like the SAT question we did yesterday, it couldn't be in the negatives.
Okay.
So now what we're going to do is talk about the triglyceride. So it said the triglyceride levels should be below 150. So again, it can't be in the negatives, so it would be 0, T, and 150. Sometimes when we write these, we don't write them as a single inequality, we write them as two separate. So you might have, and that's what I kind of did on the last problem, where I said C had to be greater than 0, but it also had to be less than 200. And you could do the same for T. You could say, okay, T has to be greater than 0, but it's also less than 150. So you could have 2 inequalities, or you could end up with 4 inequalities. It just really depends on how you graph it.
Okay, so you don't have like a preference of what?
Nope. It just
Okay.
totally depends on, like, you know, like I said, like kind of how you end up seeing the problem as you work through it.
Yeah. I just know some teachers like doing things a certain way, so.
Again, I feel like for these, you're kind of working through the problem in a way that works for you, so you might look a little different than I look. Let me grab I'm going to open this, and I'm going to take a screenshot of a graph so I can write on it. So what we can do now is kind of graph out this problem. So basically we know that it has to be greater than 0 and less than 200. So I might go by 25s. So that would be like 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150, 175, 200. So I know that cholesterol has to be to the left of 200, but to the right of 0. So cholesterol is going to be between those two values. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then the triglyceride, following that same idea, it would be 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150. So it would be capped out here. It also can't be less than 0. And then it would shade in here. So basically a healthy person would have values of triglyceride or cholesterol within this box.
I can't see the graph.
Oh, let me hit, okay, new share. Let's do this. I forget, I didn't have my whole screen on, sorry.
No, you're fine.
You can see it now though, right?
Yeah, I could like kind of visualize it. I just.
Okay, yeah. Learning my Zoom still.
Okay.
So,
That makes sense. I feel like I was just trying to do everything at once.
okay.
So then I was like overwhelmed